In last week's video, we went over how to use your release to help you with your aim and make your shot a little easier. In this week's video, we are going to actually talk about the pressures that we're putting into that release, how that's affecting our aim. It can make you hold low on target or actually spread you across the target left, right, or high as well. And we want to go through this. I'm going to give you some form breakdowns, some equipment breakdowns, individually looking at thumb releases and hinge releases, and make all of this make sense to you. In our members video this week, we're actually going to go over where the position of the hook is on the release, towards the index, in the middle, or towards the middle finger, as to how that works with your personal preference on form, and also some benefits and some areas for each style of those releases that you can think about in case you're wanting to buy a new release and you're wondering which one to get. So to start this video off, let's look at some universal stuff between all style of releases and also how that connects with our loop length and our form. So last week we talked about keeping our fingers in the middle of the release. That way that we've got even pressure, everything is running through the middle of the hand. When we are actually looking at our form, whether we're looking at photos of ourselves or videos, whatever that may be, the height of our rear elbow has some correlation with the pressure that we're putting on this release, whether it be on the top of the release or on the bottom of the release. If our loop is too short for us, one, that's going to mess up our rear shoulder position, but also it has a tendency to make your elbow get very high. And when we're doing that, we actually start having to lift up on the release, especially if we start pulling through our shot in order to execute. When people are doing this, they'll start noticing that their aim on target and their float will lock down and start drifting below the middle of the target. A lot of people will mistakenly look at this as target panic, when in reality, it's just our elbow being too high and we're lifting up on the release. You can also have this happen in reverse. If we get too long in the loop length, we can get the elbow too low. Basically, if this elbow gets below the height of our hand and our wrist, we start pulling on the top of the release and it starts pulling down. That can create some issues as well. We also want to look into rocker positions. Now, we talked about that last week in the video as well, where we're looking at how far the release is rocked to the index or away from the index, and I gave you my tip on making that a lot simpler. But I would like to look at this a little bit differently with a thumb release and with a hinge release, in regards to the pressures that we're putting into it during execution, how to set up the thumb trigger, the positioning of it, and also the hinge speed as well. When people are working with the hinge release, a very common issue that I see with a lot of people is their hinge release speed is set way too fast and they're way too heavy on their index. So they're very over rotated on this release. They'll get to full draw. They're worried about punching themselves in the face, having their release go off too early. They draw with all of their index and thumb, hardly anything on the outer fingers. And when they get there, then they're going to start trying to execute their shot and go through this. The problem with that is that because we're so index heavy and the release is rotated so far around, where the end of this release is facing closer to the target, we are actually going to start pulling our string and our loop away from our face because of the tension and the force that we're doing. Our hand is actually getting rotated around and we're pulling it out away from the face. With a compound bow, a lot of the times, depending on a hunting bow or a target bow, you're holding very minimal weight, and there's very, very low weight on the string in regards to tension. You can actually take a compound bow with the string and you could twist it 180 degrees if it didn't derail, and it would be very simple for you. At brace, most of the tension is on the string. At full draw, most of the tension is on the cable, so it transfers them. That, paired with us being too far one direction on the speed, causes a lot of issues. So you can see here on the string trainer that I have, if I am really far on the index side and I'm really over rotating this release, you can actually see that if I anchor in here and start pulling back, you can kind of start to see, and I'll exaggerate it some, but you can see the back of this loop in this area here next to my face will start coming out away from the face. So you're basically pulling in this direction. Now the same can happen if you are the type of archer that really slows that release way far down and you really over grip the release. Some people coming from a thumb release have a big tendency to do this because they're used to being able to take that thumb release in their hand and squeeze down on it really hard, and they get down in this position. You can do the same thing. You can do it in reverse. You'll start squeezing and pulling in towards your neck, and you'll start creating some problems there. Not only will you have inconsistent left and rights when the arrow is fired by doing this, you will also notice that in your aim and your sight picture, that pressure will start driving you in one direction, left or right on the target. So with the hinge release, we want to get these adjusted correctly so that as we're getting to anchor and we're getting into our pull, that we're almost at the natural balance point of this release, so that our finger pressures are even, our wrist is even, and we are able to pull straight back through that release and just allow it to rotate through until it fires. Now, when it comes to using a thumb release, these issues that we just talked about with the hinge will actually get increasingly worse. And that's because a lot of the times with a thumb release, we can put more pressure into it because of our trigger. So outside of balancing out the rocker position like we talked about in last week's video, I want to talk about adjusting where the trigger needs to land in your thumb for you. Everybody's hand shape is completely different. The length of our thumb is different, our length of our index, how we hold the release, all of that. Also, how you want the thumb barrel rather to be in that thumb itself is going to really dictate what we look at and what we see with our aim. For me, I have a very long thumb, so it's very long compared to my index finger. It goes up above it. So that's why I have a really goofy adjustment here on my thumb barrel, but it works for what I need it to. But let's say that I start over rotating this release on the index, or changing the direction and position of this thumb barrel to where I'm wrapping my thumb way around it. I'm actually going to be able to start pulling on this release and pulling it out away from my face, because the tension on my thumb is going to push into the trigger to push the release out away from the face. As you're aiming on target, if you start doing this, you're going to start pushing the release and everything outwards while you're trying to get that trigger to fire, and you'll notice your hand pops out. You'll notice that your aim wants to go off to the left side if you're a right-handed archer, all of that. The same thing if we are getting the thumb trigger too far out on our thumb and we have a very straight thumb, or we're not getting the thumb pad or the meatier part of our thumb somewhere in front of the thumb barrel. If we are just sitting here like this, then we actually have to put a lot of effort into pushing that trigger. You're either going to have to start curling the release into the thumb, or you're going to have to start pushing the thumb into the release, and that's going to cause you some issues with your left and right aim too. We're curling that thumb, or we're curling that release rather into the thumb, we're pulling it into our neck, and we can start to see our aim drag off to the right for a right-handed archer. So what we want to do is adjust this thumb barrel to where it is sitting up here to where you can get your meaty part of your thumb to the front of the trigger and in a straight line and direction to pull back from the target. So if you look at how I have my thumb button set up here and the way that it's adjusted for me, you'll see that if I'm going to start pulling from the target, this isn't a straight line, and I can just pull straight back through, and that's going to help my aim stay in the middle and in line with what I'm seeing on my float picture. Once again, our members video this week, we're going to go more in depth over where the hook is on a release, whether it's more towards the middle finger or more towards the index or in the middle, and how that actually affects the way that you're going to hold that release and execute with it. Some people may need a different style than others, and some people may naturally have their hand shape that will fit better with one over the other, or their execution style. If you enjoyed this video, check out the first one if you haven't already, over release execution manners and techniques to help you hold in the middle of the target. And as always, guys, thank you very much for your support of this channel, sharing the videos, liking, and your subscriptions here. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon.